All right, what is up, my ninjas? I'm Strydent, and welcome to my review of Devil May Cry from Netflix. This is a Netflix adaptation of Capcom's devil hunting stylish action series, which was supposed to be kind of an action take on, at that time, Resident Evil. And it actually was slated to be the next chapter of, at that time, what Resident Evil was doing, and then they turned it into a separate franchise. And if you go back and play the originals, that's why they had the lockdown, pre-rendered backgrounds, and you move through the stage very similarly to how you did in Resident Evil. But anyway, this is the newest take from Eddie Shankar Animation. It's not part of the bootleg universe proper. This is an actual Capcom licensed adaptation. And it's animated by Studio Muir, who did Voltron and I want to say Dragon's Dogma and Dota. Some really talented animation folks, artists, etc., all up in that studio. I love what they do. I love the look of what they do. Now, Devil May Cry looks very slick, very clean. I have criticisms because Devil May Cry, I am a fan of the kind of space that this game occupies. The whole Devil Hunter, modern day Devil Hunter, Demon Hunter kind of story. And I've worked on a story. I have a story I've been working on for years that it kind of fits in here, but it's not as goofy as Devil May Cry is. And I think if done right, when done right, it could actually be as influential as The Matrix was for action films back in its day. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about Devil May Cry, Netflix, and I will give you the synopsis. It's really simple. You have a mercenary named Dante who gets hired to deal with jobs that tend to have a supernatural kind of bend to them. He ends up getting double crossed and kind of thrown into this weird conspiracy to open the gates of hell and bring back demons onto the earth for reasons unknown until you go through the whole series. He is kind of pitted against, in between the White Rabbit and his group of demons, and Darkom, which is a government paramilitary organization that hunts demons. And they have their reasons for doing what they do. And essentially, Dante has to figure out how to navigate all this shit while protecting humanity from what essentially could be the end of the world. Now, this is not exactly the plot of the games, but what it does is it recontextualizes events and concepts that were introduced in the first to the third of the original Devil May Cry series. Some of the characters that you would recognize, of course, would include Dante, Virgil, Nello Angelo, I guess, that version of Virgil. Sparta, they did a really good design of Sparta that looks very similar to what we saw back in the day. And Lady, she shows up in this, and Arkham, her dad, also shows up in this, and they did a really good job kind of recontextualizing his whole shtick. Although, diehard fans would be like, "That's not who we." I mean, this just imagine this as an alternate universe version of those stories, because, like, in defense of some of the changes made, the games do a good job of giving you characters and giving you some of their motivations through speech and through like very light cutscenes, but they don't really explain the full scope of what it is they're trying to do and why. Why was Arkham wants power, Arkham wants to change the world. What's wrong with the world? In the Devil May Cry games, there's no people. You're never saving people. I think the only one that had people was the one everybody hates the most, and that's the one by Ninja Theory. And that had the most integrated plot that actually felt the most cinematic, whereas all the other ones feel more gamified. Everything is, you go to a empty ass stage that's beautifully designed, but there's no people to save. you're stopping, killing demons and stuff. But like, what are the demons doing? It's almost as if you went into the demon's home and you're fucking them up. You know what I mean? The same thing in the first game. You go to this abandoned castle that's got demons in it. Okay, so I came to their house and I'm fucking up their shit while I'm trying to investigate whatever somebody, hired me to investigate. Like, what the fuck? Like, where's the world building? The series does a really good job of world building. It creates a world where you understand this is the world as it is right now, and they explain that occasionally you have kind of breaches in the boundaries that protect or separate the demon world or Makai from the Earth world, Earth realm from our reality. And sometimes holes pop up and small demons can get in, but the big ones can't. So that's why you have those moments where, demons are running around and there are people who train and study and figure out and develop weapons to help them deal with those incursions. And there's a funny bit where Darkham, once they figure out that Dante fights demons most of the time, they put out kind of an APB on Devil Hunters, and a bunch of interesting, well known characters are amongst that. Two of them, one from Devil May Cry. Actually, two of them are from Devil May Cry's actual, lore in the games, and one of them is from DC Comics, which is strange, but it makes perfect sense. There's a lot of that kind of stuff because that's one of the things that I give props to Eddie Shankar and his team for doing. Now, what I like about this story is that Lady is a character who showed up in Devil May Cry 3. Devil May Cry 3 was a prequel to the Devil May Cry games. So a lot of fans are going to bitch and moan and say, oh, she doesn't show up until later. Actually, she predates Trish because Trish pops up at the end of Devil May Cry 3. So what they did was, instead of just making Lady some random chick with a bazooka who comes from parts unknown and is related to Arkham, they turned her dad into the catalyst for why she became a soldier that, now hunts demons as a part of this organization that was designed to hunt demons. She has a lot of the same beats and some of the same, like, the hatred for demons and stuff, and the want to kill her dad, because that's her whole purpose in the games. Is her dad's the main villain. She sides with, first she fights Dante, she can't beat him. And that's another issue I have when I get to the my nitpicks and stuff, my issues with this series. She can't beat him in the games, and then she sides with you to help you fight the bad guys and kill off eventually kill Arkham. Even so much so that at the end of the game, during the credits, which would lead to the epilogue where Devil May Cry proper, those of you who don't know, Devil May Cry is the name of Dante's actual demon hunting business. Before he starts the business and meets Trish, and the events of part 1 are supposed to be, it's alluded to that that's where we go from there. You fight off a whole bunch of demons because you didn't kill all the demons. You just killed off this sect of demons in that first game. And you stop that big incursion, and now you have to deal with, a world that's got demons in it. And so you're fighting off demons to the amazing music that's playing throughout the game and throughout the cutscene or the credits. And Lady's right there fighting alongside you. It's pretty dope. But yeah, she can't beat Dante. Yet in this series, she beats Dante a couple times, and it's like, you guys are doing a little too much. And I get it; it's 2025. We're gonna pretend like all the females can beat all the males, but like, yeah, no, absolutely not, absolutely not. She beats him a number of times, and it's the logic is kind of strange too, because they show him have that incredible healing factor that he has in all the cutscenes in the game. In the game, he literally like gets stabbed and then pulls himself the wrong way through the sword. I'm talking like blade is all the way through him to the hilt. He just moves hilt to the tip of the handle or end of the handle out the other way of his his chest, and then heals up immediately as if nothing happened. In Devil May Cry 3, gets stabbed up by like 6 or 7 scythes, and one is even in his leg, and he literally just swings the guy who's holding on to the scythe that's stabbed into his legs, kicks him into someone else, and then just hits everybody off the sides. And he continues fighting as if nothing is wrong. Throughout the fight, he's removing the pieces that are stabbed into him. And I think the one that's stuck in his leg, he just uses it and kicks people and cuts stuff. Dante is like a juggernaut. Like, you just can't stop him unless you're really high level. And it makes sense given the pedigree. He is one of the sons of Sparta. Sparta is one of the most powerful demon warriors of Mundus. And Sparta's claim to fame is that he revolted against his demon kind and stopped them from invading Earth, because essentially it's that story you usually hear with angels and such. He came to Earth, fell in love with a human, had kids, and he began to love humanity. And because he began to love humanity, he went against demon kind because they're evil. They're demons. They were going to come through, kill everybody, and then just take over the planet. And he was like, yeah, nah. People I love live there. I understand what love is. I'm going to protect it. So no. He ended up trapping himself in the demon realm with all the various demons and such. This is the event that essentially serves as the inspiration for both boys to try to do something similar, but in different ways. You have Virgil doing it in a more extremist kind of way, which puts him squarely as an anti-hero, or almost he's an anti-hero that kind of skews more villain, whereas Dante is kind of an anti-hero, but he's 100% more heroic because he's directly saving people. He prefers to work on the side of humankind, essentially. His mom's words are what plays in his mind and, stays as his reminder. And so that's why he's firmly the good guy. But yeah, there's no way Lady is beating Dante. And they show he has the crazy healing factor. I mean, so much so that he heals from a bomb in his head. Throughout it's like an episode later, his face is all good. Like maybe 20 minutes into the episode, he's healed from his half of his face blowing off. But then she injects him with like a sedative and he gets knocked out. And it's like, are you fucking kidding me? You didn't read the rest of your own script? I guess I should jump into what I don't like about the series, because like the positives, let's do it this way. We'll do some positives and then I'll jump into my issues. The positives, like I said, Studio Muir, amazing. Everything they do has this very polished look. The animation is very, very, very clean and easy to read. And it feels more like, I think they're a Korean studio, if I remember correctly. But you can clearly tell that they're very inspired by 90s anime, A lot of the camera angles and their designs, their character designs, harken back to 90s anime. I love it. I have no problems with it. Even their computer animated stuff that's integrated doesn't feel so out of place because they've matched the styles. Great stuff. The soundtrack to the series was great because Dante is one of those 90s badass characters, and he feels like he just grew up during the 90s, but he never really grew up. He came into his own during the 90s, and that's squarely who he is. So it informs everything. So they used music from that time period. The fact that they had Rage Against the Machine in there, I was like, are you fucking kidding me? I loved it. And even the designs, you can see when you look at the designs, there's a character that has like a Nightwing inspired looking mask. And you could tell like they were throwing back to 90s shit. Some of the characters look like 90s Image superheroes and stuff, big pockets, shoulder pads, swords when everybody else is carrying guns, you know what I mean? Like there was that 90s feel, that everybody shits on, but everybody is inspired by. Even kids growing up in the 2000s, when they make shit that's good, it always has 90s DNA in it. The sound quality was amazing. The sound was just like it was impeccable. Everything felt the way it was supposed to feel. The voice acting was amazing all across the board. Um, the White Rabbit was voiced by the one dude. I got to look up his name. He was in Warrior. I was watching Warrior when it first dropped, and I was like off and on with it. And the more I watched, the better it got for me. You know, like I had breaks, and then I came back and I watched, and I was like, this is what I wanted. This is pretty dope. The action was really good. But there's a guy. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. I'll tell you his name in just a second. Um, Hoon Lee. I think that's his name. Hoon Lee. Yes, Hoon Lee is the White Rabbit. He was shit on Warrior. He played Wang Chao, and Wang Chao was kind of like a dignified Chinese immigrant who I think spent a lot of time in Europe. So when he came to America, he had a very European kind of style of dress, but he did have aspects of his, fashion and everything that harken back to his Chinese roots. But he was kind of a trickster and kind of like a what's a good way of describing it? He was the type of guy who would kind of manipulate situations and such. But he was very Shakespearean in his approach here with like a modern twist to it, and it felt really good. Um, a strange casting choice was that Johnny Young Bosch, who was Nero's voice in the Devil May Cry series, he was the voice of Dante. Meanwhile, Ruben Langdon, who's been the voice of Dante for quite some time, they didn't tap him. Just like they didn't tap him for Ken. He was the voice of Ken for a little while. I guess he's white and blonde, so Japan was like, hey, make him do the voice. But he was the voice of Ken in, I want to say, Street Fighter 4, and then they didn't bring him back for 5 or 6. And you're kind of like, what's the problem here? Why? Um, and I remember there was something political. He said something, and they just were like, "Meh." He was the voice of Dante. He was in Devil May Cry 3. I think starting from Devil May Cry 3 to like one of the Marvel versus Capcom games, he was Dante. And then all of a sudden, they stopped using him. Daniel Southworth, who played the Quantum Ranger on Time Force, was the voice of Virgil. He has a very unique voice. He's nowhere to be seen in here. They got a whole new voice actor for him. So it makes you wonder, because I know for the Ninja Theory DMC, they had a whole new cast, but all the characters were very different. Their approach, the way they carry themselves, the world that they existed in was not the same world as the one that we got used to in the other games. So like they got different actors who fit that better. And they did. Everybody fit their roles perfectly. So it's strange that they have John Young Bosch, because ultimately, if you pay attention to the way this game is being, this story is being rolled out to us, it's Devil May Cry 1 or Devil May Cry 3 with elements from some of the other games, but they found a way to build a world so that you give a shit about the threats and what's going on. And it ends with a epilogue that sets up Devil May Cry 1 and 2. More so 2, because chronologically it's 3, 2, and then 1. Because they show the Heihachi looking dude. I always forget that guy's name. They show the guy's name is Arius. They show Arius and the Ouroboros Corporation, which is funny because they use that with what was her name? Excelia or Excella Gione, or yeah, I think that was how you say it, from Resident Evil. I think that was 5 or 6. Anyway, same concept. Ouroboros was the corporation and whatnot, and it was actually a thing in Resident Evil. But anyway, you see when they invade Hell, when the government invades Hell, they set up the Ouroboros Corporation there, which is a little different from what it was in the Devil May Cry 2. But they show you Arias. He's standing there next to the vice president, and you see they're setting up shop. So they're letting you know that this is going to be, elements from Devil May Cry 2 are going to be a part of this game, or this next chapter, this next season. And so if that's the way they're going, I would imagine they're going to find a way to rework things. You are shown, what's her face? Lucia getting captured, who was the second disc. You play through the whole game as another devil hunter, a female. And she gets snatched up in the beginning of the game, or beginning of the series, when they show that the vice president puts out a hit or an APB on all the demon hunters. She's one of the ones that gets snatched up. So I would imagine they're gonna free her, and Dante's gonna have to navigate whatever the fuck is going on there. And this time they'll be in the demon world doing this stuff. So like they just recontextualize a lot of things, and still sound, voices, the actors, all of them were on point. Lady's voice actress was pretty dope. She sounded more capable than the lady that was in the comic. I mean, in the games. In the games, she's a little bit less. At least in 3, she's a little bit less sure of herself. She feels very like amateurish, whereas in the series, she's literally like a star soldier. Like she's the greatest of the bunch, and it's kind of cool. It's cool to see her moved from amateur status to being like the shit. You know what I mean? I think if I remember correctly, she was not voiced by the same person who voiced her in the game. She's voiced by Scout Taylor Compton in the here in the series, but in the game, I have to look back at who voiced her because I do not remember who did her voice. Just give me a second while I look that up. Yeah, ignore the noise in the background. But yeah, she was voiced by Carrie Walgren in Devil May Cry 3, and Melissa Davis in 3 and 4 she was Carrie Walgren, and then Melissa Davis in the animated series that happened previously to this. Because believe it or not, there was a Devil May Cry animated series, a Japanese animated series that came out before this. It was pretty cool. Dante was invincible in that one until the end when he fought a demon swordsman that whooped his ass, and that was cool because it was like now he had a challenge. But yeah, everything was great. Everything was great. The voices were great. Like I said, the action. We'll talk about the action. The action was really good too. It wasn't as over the top as Devil May Cry 3, which had, I want to say, a lot of action sequences directed by my homeboy Ryuhei Kitamura, which fits how insanely powerful Dante is, but they kind of toned it down. And even in its toned down nature, it still was over the top as fuck. It was just like, damn, this is pretty cool. Especially considering that a lot of times in modern day action cinema, they don't really push anything. So seeing them push things to give you kind of a throw or callbacks to moves and abilities that Dante has had in other Devil May Cry games was pretty nice, But yeah, overall, if you're just watching it to watch as a action show, there's tons of action. It's consistent. It's well animated, and it makes sense. You can understand what you're seeing, so you won't be disappointed there. Okay, the last piece of what I like is they gave a really good description or explanation for the realms. The essentially it's parallel universes that are, or parallel dimensions that are separated by like some type of quantum field, and that they have, the demons are essentially like, it's similar to what they did with Doom, the original Doom film, where it was like we had an extra chromosome or some shit, or a couple extra chromosomes, and it was like that's what mutated us into demons, quote unquote. And they did a similar thing here, where technically they have physiology, but then they have some extra or different strands of DNA that make them go off into the direction that makes them mutate so much further that it's like a whole nother thing. And because they grew up in another dimension, they have mutations that kind of allow for them to properly survive in that alternate realm. And I'm like, oh, okay, fine. That would make sense. If you grew up in another dimension, you probably would have some mutations or adaptations that allow you to deal with the harsher environment, if it's a harsh environment. And in this case, it was. And it makes sense. It wasn't too far-fetched in that respect. But I think they did that to allow for why humans could go to hell and survive, which is a plot point. It'll make you sick long term, but you potentially could survive. So, they were trying to get the explanation out of the way so that it would allow for their world, the world that they're creating, worlds that they have created, to properly exist all together and work in the confines of the story. Anyway, let's move on to what I didn't like, because there's a lot. So this clearly was written by millennial writers. How do I know this? Millennial writers tend to moonlight as activists, and they have the same talking points in everything they do. And what talking point do you think I'm pointing out in this? In the early 2000s, which would have been when a lot of, early to mid 2000s, a lot of these millennials were getting of adult age and were able to start getting jobs in the entertainment industry. Whenever they write something, it would have a thinly veiled kind of counter to something that was considered stereotypical or cliche at this point. The two things that they did the most were taking the fantastical out of fantastical properties. Freaking King Arthur, Batman, James Bond. They took all the fantastical creative elements out, and they said, no, he can't act like that. That's wrong. Motherfucker, this shit ain't real. So anything goes, but almost anything goes. You got to be kind of fair to the audience. We want to enjoy it, but within that realm, almost anything goes. So they would do that, and then the other thing they would do is it would be that the villain is sympathetic. You start seeing this in horror movies. You start seeing it in action films. Oh, and the third thing was everyman. All of the heroes were always some regular 20 to 30-something-year-old dude who just could do all the things but didn't have muscles. He didn't have any indications visually that he was good at doing a thing. You know what I mean? Like, he just looked like a normal guy. They would always cast, Colin Farrell or Matt Damon or sometimes Ben Affleck. But then they would put him in these crazy situations, and you're supposed to believe that they have number one, you're supposed to believe that they've had the number of years of experience necessary to do what they do and still look like he's fresh out of college. You know what I mean? And in some cases, when they cast the dude who played Green Arrow on, I think his name is Justin Hartley. He was in a couple series and stuff where or a guy that looked somewhat like him, young Joel Kinnaman and stuff like that. They put him in these roles where it's like normally you would have had someone who looks like Schwarzenegger or Lundgren or even Van Damme. They've got lines in their faces. They've got muscles. They've got a chin that looks like they could, it could take a car. A car could ram, head first into their chin and they could probably survive it. They looked like they were tough. They look like they've been through shit. If you put scars on their body, when they take off their shirt and they have that, shirtless moment that you always see in action films, they look like they earned it. They look like they've been through some shit. The muscles look like they were a byproduct of going through a ton of shit. Not that they were models that had a lot of time to sculpt their body to look like they went through some shit or to look like they're capable, and then you put them in the role. I mean, like, we're seeing it come back a little bit with certain guys. Like Reacher looks like he's been through some shit, although they don't scar him up. They should, because he is the male model version of this, but at least he has some action chops. He can sell it better than other people do. Um they just that this had become a big thing. So you take the fantasy out, you make the hero an everyman, and then you make the bad guys essentially sympathetic, where we can be like, oh, I understand why they did the evil fucking genocides that they did. I can see why they eat people now. Oh, he didn't get hugs. I can see why they pillage and raep everything and dismember and whatever. They could do the most heinous shit, and it could be explained away in a, oh, but he's handsome and his mom mistreated him when he was a kid, or his dad mistreated him when he was a kid. It's understandable. Feel sorry for them. We saw it get to like the peak in the like the early 20s, the 2020s, when actually a little bit before that. Like we saw it in Captain Marvel with the fucking Skrulls. They're a warlike race. That's, if you look up the Skrulls in Marvel Comics, warlike race that tend to have shapeshifters involved as well, and or shapeshifting abilities. And if you read what they've done in the comics, they've done some fucked up shit. What does the MCU do? Nope. We couldn't take a race that already exists in Marvel Comics and make them the refugee race that we're protecting from the Skrulls. You turn the Skrulls into the sympathetic analog for Middle Eastern refugees, freaking Mexican refugees, refugees from wherever that are trying to come to the United States for help. They've done this shit with all kinds of things, and they hit a new low with this fucking series where demons, all demons aren't bad. They're demons. And you know what's funny is that a more skilled writer, or someone with imagination, or the thing that's lacking the most in the entertainment industry, and I'm talking like toys, I'm talking action figures, sometimes video games, comics, it's vision. Why not just make a group of demons who had an experience with a human, and it opened their eyes, and they decided not to play to their nature, like a group of Hellboys, essentially, and have them be the ones that they're alongside the White Rabbit, because the White Rabbit is the human that, before he became the White Rabbit, he's the human that opened their eyes to, like, there's more to life than this particular thing that you see everyone doing. Because it could be a commentary on mob mentality, you know what I mean? Or cultural expectation. There's a lot of things. I talk about it all the time. You're black in America, you're supposed to do a bunch of stereotypical shit that other people designed for us to do. And a lot of it is not good. But what if you don't want to do those things? What if I don't want to listen to fucking music about murdering and doing drugs and doing all the most heinous shit? What if I don't want to dress wearing giant labels everywhere? What if I don't want to watch fucking BET? You know what I mean? Like, what if I don't want to listen to anything quote unquote generic black? What happens if you're not actually from, your ancestry is from another part of the world where black people are, and you come to the US and that's where you live? You're expected to all of a sudden conform to this handful of things that, like, it's very limited in what you can do. Like, according to a lot of black folks, I shouldn't make comics, and I shouldn't make toys, and I shouldn't like sci-fi, and I shouldn't listen to any other music that's not necessarily made by black folks. If I listen to orchestral, you're listening to white people music. If you're listening to jazz, you're listening to white people music, even though jazz has a good chunk of all kinds of people. And some of the best jazz don't come from the U.S. If I'm listening to rock music ain't for black people. You know what I mean? You hear this kind of shit. You know what I'm saying? This as a brown skin. I'm black as far as everything goes. I'm Afro-Latino, but in America, I got the one drop of blackness. I'm black. So, like, this kind of story could have easily been like, let's take a group of these particular types of beings, and let's have this human who is an outcast amongst his own, and they find commonality, and they are the group that's not trying to live in hell. They're the group trying to essentially separate themselves from their hellish backgrounds. You know what I mean? And they get caught up in the war between Earth and Hell. That would have been far more interesting. But instead, what do? They simultaneously tell you that somebody protected Earth realm from Hell with demons and all of that. And then at the same time, that all the demons aren't actually bad. So, what are you trying to tell me? If the majority of the demons aren't actually bad, so you're telling me Sparta's a moron? You're telling me Sparta didn't know that the majority of demons don't want to do all the shit that the group of evil ones that work under Mundus were doing? You're telling me that the definition of a demon, because this plays into the way the world is right now, or at least the way a lot of people are trying to make the world, words have meaning, you know? I could go real, not buzzwordy, but like, and I don't want to be political, but there's some specific words you all know has to do with the types of people that exist on the planet that are losing the meaning. And there's other things, other words that are commonly used that they keep on trying to remove from the lexicon. And they try to tell you that, no, it's not what you've been told that it means, even though the definition of the word is as such. Now that word has no meaning. This is in line with the same thing. You're going to tell me now demon doesn't mean what it means? A demon, there's no positive to demon unless you're using demonic focus, meaning you have this superhuman, supernatural level of focus that usually evil things have with killing and doing that kind of intent. If you have a demonic focus, kind of like when they say people go into goblin mode or some shit like that, like you're focused. I guess goblin mode is more negative, but like you're focused. When they say you go into beast mode, let's use that. It's that same connotation. You put all your focus to push past whatever limit you had with like ferocity, and you're just not stopping. That's the only time you could use something like this in a positive way. Now you're going to tell us that actual fucking demons, we got millions of books, including some religious texts from all over the fucking globe that say demons bad. And now you're going to say, no, actually, they're just like you. They're humans. They're nice. They just want to they want to protect their families. We saw this shit in the Rings of Power. All of a sudden, the Uruk-hai and the orcs, they have families. They were built for the one thing. We saw it in the movies. You read about it in the books. They're made to kill. They don't have another setting. Millennial fucking writers get a hold of them, and then they do this bullshit. And it's just getting old. If you notice, like I haven't done a review of a film or a video game or whatever in a long time. And I've stopped because if I did, a lot of these reviews are going to have the same sentiment. These writers suck ass through a straw and come back for thirds. They don't have enough life experience. They don't have a broad enough imagination to take on the source material. They don't know anything outside of whatever it is whatever box they check. And it's frustrating. And then you have new people coming up and they're anxious to check off a box instead of being anxious to live life. Because the life you live, and if you live a very varied, very well-rounded life, it helps inform the stories that you can tell. We live in this weird binary ass society. It's always you're either with us or you're with them. And it's like the world is not actually separated into two groups. Like go live some shit, motherfucker, so you can tell us something. Otherwise, shut up and go stay over there. We don't want to hear the same fucking nonsense over and over. Devil May Cry was really clear because as a game, it's pretty simple. Dante, half human, half demon. He fights both, but he protects mankind from demons. Because guess what? Demons bad. Demons infiltrate humanity, and they look like different things. They found a way to pervert humanity, which plays into the typical, archetypical stories of demons throughout the ages, to the point where the fucking Vatican was infected by demons. Mundus is coming out looking like some statue of God. You know what I mean? Like, you have the shit just, it was like I was enjoying the action. And then I get to this point where I'm like, damn, that story's kind of fucked up. And then I'm like, but wait a second. Why couldn't some of the demon realms, why couldn't you have realms parallel to hell? And then that way you have another group of things that don't look as demonic as the demons that could be mistaken for demons. And then we'd be like, oh, it's an offshoot. Or the thing I said earlier, where you just have a group of demons that don't want to fit in. They're just, for some reason, they were born on a ring of hell that's so far from all the fucked up shit that they're just kind of like weak as fuck and they can't fight. And they're just like, can we do something else? I mean, then again, the whole characterization of hell is kind of weird in this story because, like, it's a metaphysical realm. You know what I mean? Like, it's a plane of existence, but it's not the, you don't be born in hell unless you're a demon. So, like, no one's like, I'm going to create a family in hell. No one's like, my goal is to get a house and a picket fence in fucking hell. Like, come the fuck on. And no one at Netflix, no one in the writing staff was like, yeah, this is kind of stupid. Let's tweak this to make it make more sense. Nope. They said, hey, we're going directly to production. Like fuck it, we're doing it live. You know what I mean? Get the fuck out of here. And it sucks that, like, something with the production values of such a show is marred by such a fucked up, dumb ass plot, you know, or a piece of the plot that just doesn't match. I could take almost everything else and just be like, oh, it's fun. And then you get to that part and it's like, how did you miss the mark so hard? It's kind of like, you know, you have all these Transformers fans, but then the people who love the Bayformers stuff don't realize how dumb the Bayformers story is in comparison to what we were presented with as children in the G1 cartoon. And every time you say something, it starts a fight, but it's like, stop fighting because that's what they want us to do, and pay attention to the fact that there is a meaning. You know what I mean? Like, there is a logic to what's going on, and the logic is missed because somebody didn't pay attention to what was being said in that show. And we see it with other stuff. You see it with, like, the Snyderverse. You know, if Superman is supposed to be the guy that brings hope, but you never got him to that level, so how does he bring hope? How does anybody give a shit about Superman? He's clad in black and he's always showing up with glowing red eyes and he's punching the shit out of everything. Who's looking at him going like, yes, Superman's saving us? Like, I mean, I know there was a montage of him saving people in BVS, but, like, the same world that he's doing those things, they treat him like shit, and you're just like, that doesn't make sense. There would be a huge chunk of people who would be like, this guy is amazing. And there would be an outlier of groups of people who are like, he could be evil. Just like in reality when it comes to anything good for people. But, like, when you say these things to the Snyder cult, they don't get it. You know? Like, even right now, they're dissing the new movie, which looks completely positive, in favor of a universe that's long gone. The Snyderverse is gone. It's done. But, like, you're seeing this weird, like, pick a side. And it's like, why don't you just live life so you can appreciate that, and then now you could turn around and appreciate the next thing. You know what I'm saying? Because you're not pointing out what's actually wrong, if anything is wrong, with either of the two interpretations. You're seeing this along the lines of a lot of things that come out, and it sucks that, like, this is what it's devolved into. Comics are the same way. This is why I don't really say anything anymore. I don't feel like there's worth anymore because people don't listen. You can't even have a civilized discussion in the comments. And it's to the point, too, that if you don't fit into the echo chamber, if I don't just say, Devil May Cry sucks, because it doesn't overall suck, don't get me wrong. But this story point, this plot point, this concept, it sucks so bad. It's laughably bad. And if if I don't just say that the whole thing sucks, which is usually the YouTube version of just about anything, instead of the nuanced take where you say, this is good, this is bad, this is really bad, this is really good, it's the whole thing sucks because they made one mistake. If you remember, that's why I started my channel. Superman, Batman, Apocalypse. The YouTube version of the review was, the whole thing sucks because Andre Braugher is the voice of Darkseid. When in reality, the whole thing did not suck. The animation was dope. Fight scenes were awesome. The story was nice and smooth and very, it's fairly tight. Just about as tight as the comic is. It had one of the best final fights in the DCAU. It was kind of a swerve, and then it was just fucking chaos, And that if you listen to YouTubers, they were saying it sucked simply because it wasn't done the way that they wanted it to be done. Well, you don't make movies, so who gives a shit how you wanted it to be done? You know what I mean? You don't even study movies properly, so who gives a shit that you don't think the way it's done is correct? You're not giving us anything else to work with to understand why, other than one particular actor was a different actor than what you were used to up to that point. That's not a good enough explanation for why you would say that the whole thing is a failure. Yet, that's YouTube. Meanwhile, I made a video and I'm telling you about all the things that are happening in this film. The good, the bad, the ugly. There's not much bad. There's not much ugly. There's a ton of good. And then here's a difference. And I don't get that kind of buy-in that those guys get because they just dogpile along with everybody else on whatever the trend is. And that's tiring for me because I want to have a discussion. Like I'm telling you, Devil May Cry as a series, it's not great, but it's not bad. It's the same thing with like this last Captain America. It's not great, but it's not bad. You know what I mean? It's just, you're not going to remember it down the line. And we want all of this shit to be memorable, but like between that and the Marvels, I'll take that any day. You know what I mean? You have to be able to have a nuanced take about stuff. You have to be able to be objective, and not only be objective, but it helps when you have enough experience that you can articulate what's wrong, why it's wrong, and how you could fix it, which I've done right here. Change demons being good to group of demons being good. Change it to a human goes to a different realm that's parallel to hell, and they get mistaken for demons. There's so many directions you could go with this. Have people who found a gateway into hell not knowing what it was, they get mutated, they come back, they find a way back to Earth, now they're mistaken for demons. There's so many ways you could do it. We just wanted to live. We got stuck in hell and we didn't even know how we got there. And we're coming back to Earth. We need help. And the fucking Darkcom guys are like, demon, pop, 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 pop. And they kill a bunch of them. One of them survives. He's the least scarred of the bunch. But mentally, he loses it. Sews the fucking White Rabbit face onto him, mask onto his face. And he essentially takes on a lot of the characteristics of actual demons in his revenge tour. Better than what we got. And I just came up with that off the dome, just like I do, off the brain. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. It's not hard. And these motherfuckers get paid to do this shit. People are going to be like, why are you cursing about it? Because I'm sick of this. I'm sick of it. I've devoted my whole life to making art, this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? And the people who get the job lack the vision to actually do the fucking job. Like, there are aspects of the story that make the Capcom games look dumb because they actually fleshed out entire parts of Dante's history that we have never seen except for in DMC. Even the first animated Devil May Cry that they did had that same kind of thing where they showed Dante in an actual world doing things and interacting with people who are part of how he can maintain a business. How you would know that Dante exists in this world is because you'd be allied or you'd work alongside or work with or see these people that hire him to do different jobs. That informs what kind of a character he is. It also informs how people would react to this guy. But in the game, we don't have that because they never bothered to tell you any. They tell you in the instruction manual or in the section with art, and it explains some stuff, but never, you don't get to play it. Well, I mean, this is a visual medium. Show, don't tell. They failed. They failed miserably. It's been what, 20 something years, maybe 30 since the first Devil May Cry, and we're learning this shit from other mediums and not the games. And the one game who did this stuff, you all shat on it because it didn't look and feel exactly like the other ones. It was trying to be a little bit more serious. I mean, like, it's kind of weird, man. Like, it's kind of weird. You say you want one thing, they give it to you, and then you bitch and moan and you diss the fucking thing, and then we get this shit again, and it's like, this is along the lines of the kind of shit you guys ask for. But you guys won't take the time when you feel that something is wrong to really give a succinct explanation, a fair explanation, Praise what's done well and criticize what's done poorly. And then instead of just saying it's done poorly, offer a fix. That's a proper critique. If I did this if I reviewed everything that came out, I'm telling you, I would, all the way back to like Wakanda Forever, I'd have a ton of, I'd be very tired. and you're seeing the kind of logic that I just kind of exposed. I mean, it shouldn't be an expose because you all see it. I mean, I don't think many care to actually speak out on it. But like the type of logic that's allowing all these kind of goated franchises and IPs to kind of get the poo-poo treatment. It more of us need to expose it, and then we need to stop paying attention to it. Because I think these groups like Studio Muir could be doing something better. Like a better package, if less of this bullshit was infecting the entertainment industry. Like it's such an imaginative IP. You have so much room to like innovate or at least just go off the wall with some crazy ideas. We didn't have to have anything along those lines somehow get into this plot. Yet, here we are. It's frustrating. It's extremely frustrating. And it brings down the quality of this series exponentially. Every good thing I said gets marred when you start realizing how dumb the plot is, Even the visual iconography. You got the demons wrapped up in shawls and shit looking like stereotypical Middle Eastern refugees carrying their babies. It's like the old footage we used to see back in the day during the Gulf War and stuff like that, and in Kosovo and all those places, those Europeans and those like Eastern Bloc nations that are constantly, being shot at, and there's all this crazy. It's like that kind of iconography, and they did that shit on purpose, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't fucking work. And it was exactly the same thing with the Skrulls. It doesn't fucking work. You know what I mean? Like, it just doesn't work. Like, if you don't know about anything and you live in a box, you know what I mean? You live under a rock, then maybe this will work for you. You won't see anything wrong with anything that I laid out in my negative section. But like, if you've been paying attention, this should not work for you. It should not work. Like, you could easily separate action, good, story, bad. You know what I mean? Setup for some of these stories, bad. Even the amazing second to last episode that reveals the plot, the backstory for Lady and the White Rabbit. As awesome as the storytelling is, because there's no dialogue, aspects of the White Rabbit story, which involves the demons, it fails the whole thing because of the context of what you're seeing. He's trying to immigrate with demons from hell. Come on now. Demons are trying to immigrate from hell. And the big bad Americans are shooting up They're clad in red, white, and blue and gold with eagles on their belt buckles and big guns. And at the end, fucking Baines, who unfortunately, the performance is amazing. And he's voiced by Kevin Conroy in probably one of his last roles. And that's what he's doing. It's like this would have been an amazing role if the idea was to show the what's the word? The arrogance and the inflated sense of invincibility that the American government has. That they're like, oh, we're gonna weaponize hell. That would have been dope. No, instead, it's them going in to colonize hell and utilize it, set up a base of operations. It's like, come on, guys. It just, anyway, I'm going to stop myself because this is already reaching an hour and most of you don't watch past like 30 minutes of what I have to say. So I want to stop it before I get to an hour. It's a good series in the sense that if you're watching it while you're doing other things and you want to see Dante beat the shit out of everybody and see some cool action sequences with 90s rock music and some electronic stuff going on, yeah, you'll enjoy that. Past that, the story fails on a lot of levels. You do get further characterization of Lady, further characterization of Dante, and slightly further characterization of Arkham. If you're looking for that stuff, watch it, get your fix from that, and then just go on to watch better shit. You know what I mean? Go watch Dragon's Dogma or something else. You'll enjoy it. So, yeah, that's going to do it for me. I would give this like, I don't know, a C minus, you know, maybe even a D. But, you know, watch it, keep those things in mind, enjoy the parts that are done well, ignore the parts that suck. That's it for me. You've been great. Peace outside.